Please help! My mom! They're hurting my mom! The words tore through Rosie's truck stop like a knife through silence. 7-year-old Emma Rodriguez burst through the glass doors, her yellow sundress torn at the shoulder, dirt streaking her tear-stained face, her small bare feet bloody from running across the gravel parking lot. Her voice was a desperate shriek that froze every conversation, every bite of food, every sip of coffee. 6 Hells Angels sitting in the corner booth looked up from their breakfast. Bull Martinez, the road captain, was halfway through his eggs when his fork clattered to the plate. Around him, his brothers, Snake, Hammer, Wrench, Ghost, and Diesel, all stood as one, years of riding together creating an instant, wordless understanding. The little girl ran straight toward them, past truckers and waitresses, and the startled cook visible through the kitchen window. She grabbed Bull's leather vest with desperate hands, her small fingers clutching the Hells Angels patch as if it were a lifeline. "Please, mister," Emma gasped between sobs. "My mom, in the parking lot, bad men, they're hitting her. Please." Before we continue, if you believe in standing up for those who can't defend themselves, please subscribe to Bike Diaries. These are the stories that remind us heroes exist in unexpected places. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Bull knelt down to Emma's eye level, his weathered face softening. "Where's your mom, sweetheart?" "Behind the big trucks," Emma pointed with a shaking hand toward the far end of the parking lot. "2 men. They won't stop. Mama told me to run and get help. She said find the biggest, scariest people. I saw your motorcycles." Bull looked at his brothers. No words were needed. They'd all taken an oath when they joined the club. Protect the innocent, especially children and women. This wasn't even a question. "Show us," Bull said, already moving. The scene they found was brutal. Behind 2 idling 18-wheelers, partially hidden from the main parking lot, a woman in her early 30s was on the ground. 2 men stood over her, one in a dirty white tank top, the other in a black leather jacket that wasn't the kind earned through brotherhood, but bought to look tough. The one in the tank top was pulling the woman up by her hair, while the other drew back his fist. "Mama!" Emma screamed from behind the bikers. Both men turned. The one in the leather jacket, clearly the leader, sneered at the approaching Hells Angels. "This is a private conversation. Move along." Bull's voice was calm, deadly calm. "Step away from the woman, now." The man laughed, pulling a knife from his belt. "You think because you got some patches you can tell me what to do? This is between me and my property. She owes us money." "She's not property," Snake said quietly, moving to Bull's left. "And you just pulled a weapon in front of a child." The woman, Maria Rodriguez, looked up through swollen eyes. "Emma, baby, I told you to run far away." "I did, Mama," Emma said, her voice small but proud. "I found help." What happened next was fast, precise, and devastatingly efficient. These were men who'd been in combat, some in wars overseas, others in the brutal conflicts of the streets. When the man with the knife lunged at Bull, he never had a chance. Bull sidestepped, caught his wrist, twisted, and the knife clattered to the asphalt. One punch, clean, professional, and the man went down hard. His partner tried to run. Hammer, 6'4" and built like his name, simply stepped in his path. The man bounced off Hammer's chest and stumbled backward into Ghost's waiting arms. Within 30 seconds, both attackers were face down on the pavement, secured by men who knew exactly how to restrain, without causing unnecessary injury. Wrench was already on his phone. "We need police and an ambulance at Rosie's truck stop. Woman beaten, child present, 2 suspects secured." Bull knelt beside Maria, his massive hands surprisingly gentle as he helped her sit up. "Ma'am, you're safe now. Help's coming." Can you tell me what happened?" Maria's lip was split, one eye swelling shut, bruises already forming on her arms. "Loan sharks," she whispered. "I borrowed money 6 months ago when Emma was sick. Hospital bills. I've been paying, but they kept adding interest. They said today if I didn't have everything, they'd take Emma as collateral." Her voice broke. "They were going to take my baby." Emma ran to her mother, throwing her arms around her neck. "I got help, Mama, just like you said. I got help." Bull felt something hard and cold settle in his chest. He'd seen evil in many forms, but threatening to kidnap a child over a debt? That was a special kind of monster. "How much do you owe?" he asked quietly. 15,000, Maria said. "I borrowed 5. But with their interest—" She trailed off, hopeless. The sirens arrived then. 2 police cruisers and an ambulance. Sheriff Mike Crawford stepped out, recognizing Bull immediately. The Hells Angels had done charity work with the department for years, raised money for fallen officers' families, never caused trouble in his county. "Bull," Sheriff Crawford said, "what have we got?" "Loan sharks beating a woman in your parking lot, threatening to kidnap her kid over a debt," Bull said, his voice hard. "Both suspects are right there. The woman and child need medical attention. And, Sheriff, these guys mentioned they work for someone. Might want to ask them who's running the operation?" The 2 men were cuffed and loaded into separate cruisers. The one in the leather jacket was already talking, desperate to cut a deal, naming names. It would lead to a larger investigation. But that was for later. The paramedics checked Maria and Emma. Maria had bruised ribs, cuts, and contusions, but nothing broken. Emma's feet were treated and bandaged. The terror in both their eyes was the injury that would take longest to heal. As Maria was being helped into the ambulance, she reached out and grabbed Bull's hand. "Thank you. If Emma hadn't found you—" Her voice broke. "But she did," Bull said gently. "Your daughter's brave. You raised her right." "Will you—" Maria hesitated. "Will you check on us at the hospital? I'm scared they'll come back. These men, they have friends." Bull looked at his brothers. They all nodded. "We'll make sure you're safe. That's a promise." If this story is touching your heart, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for Bike Diaries. Every subscription helps us share more stories about courage and unexpected heroes. Bull and Snake arrived at County General Hospital that evening. They found Maria in a semi-private room, Emma asleep in the chair beside her bed, clutching a stuffed bear one of the nurses had given her. Maria was awake, staring at the ceiling. When she saw them, she started crying again. "The police came. They said those men are part of a bigger organization. They said I might need to testify. I'm so scared. We have nowhere to go. I can't go back to our apartment. They know where we live." "How did you get mixed up with loan sharks?" Snake asked, not judgmentally, but trying to understand. Maria's story poured out. Single mother, working 2 jobs, barely making ends meet. When Emma got sick with pneumonia and needed hospitalization, Maria's insurance didn't cover everything. She'd exhausted all legitimate options. Credit cards maxed out, bank loans denied, family unable to help. Someone at her night job mentioned a guy who could help, no questions asked. She'd been desperate. "I thought I could pay it back," Maria whispered. But the interest kept growing. Every payment I made barely touched the principal. Then they started threatening Emma. Said they knew men who'd pay good money for a pretty little girl. She closed her eyes. "I was going to disappear. Pack up tonight and run. That's why they came for me today. They knew." Bull felt rage simmer in his chest, but kept his voice calm. "You're not running. Not alone, anyway. Let me make some calls." The Hells Angels held an emergency meeting at their clubhouse. 20 members showed up. Bull explained the situation. Woman and child in danger, loan sharks with connections, Nowhere safe to go. We're not a witness protection program, one member said. We've got our own families to worry about. That little girl ran to us, Bull said quietly. She chose us when she had nobody else. She grabbed my vest and begged for help. Can any of you walk away from that? The room was silent. Then Diesel, who rarely spoke in meetings, cleared his throat. My sister runs a women's shelter in the next county. Secure facility. They could stay there temporarily. Temporarily's not enough, Hammer said. These guys have reach. Maria said they've got connections to organized crime in 3 states. She testifies she's a target forever. Snake leaned forward. Then we make her untouchable. Club protection. Full commitment. We relocate them, set them up somewhere safe, provide security until this organization is dismantled. The club president, a 60-year-old Vietnam vet named Reaper, spoke for the first time. Motion on the table. Club adopts Maria and Emma Rodriguez under our protection. Full resources, long-term commitment. This isn't charity. This is oath. We protect those who can't protect themselves. All in favor? Every hand went up. The Hells Angels worked with the police and federal prosecutors. Maria's testimony was crucial. She could identify multiple members of the Loan Shark operation, detail their practices, provide evidence that would bring down the entire network. In exchange, she received protection. Not witness protection. Better than that. Hells Angels protection. They moved Maria and Emma to a small apartment in a town 2 hours away. The lease was paid for a year. The building had security cameras installed by Wrench, who turned out to be a licensed electrician. 4 different bikers lived within a 5-minute ride, ready to respond to any threat. Diesel's sister's shelter provided Maria with counseling, job placement services, and legal aid to deal with her debt. It turned out that predatory loans charging 300% interest were illegal, and with the bikers' help, she had lawyers ready to fight. Emma started at a new school. On her first day, 6 Hells Angels escorted her. Not aggressively, just a visible reminder that this child was protected. The other kids thought it was the coolest thing ever. Emma beamed. It came at 2 a.m. Bull's phone rang. The security system at Maria's apartment had been triggered. Someone was trying to break in. 10 minutes later, 12 Hells Angels surrounded the building. They found a man attempting to jimmy the lock on Maria's door. He froze when he saw them, tried to run, and ran straight into Ghost, who'd positioned himself at the stairwell exit. Sheriff Crawford arrived to find the would-be intruder secured. Alive, but very aware he'd made a terrible mistake. You guys called this in before handling him? The sheriff asked, surprised. We learned from last time, Bull said with a slight smile. Procedure matters. We secured the threat, but we're not vigilantes. He's all yours. The intruder talked immediately. He was low-level muscle sent to send a message about cooperating with police. His information led to 3 more arrests. Maria and Emma, who'd hidden in the bathroom during the incident, emerged to find their apartment surrounded by bikers, all scanning for additional threats. Emma ran to Bull. You came. Told you we would, kiddo, Bull said. You're family now. Family shows up. Rosie's truck stop, where it all began, became a gathering place. The Hells Angels started frequenting it regularly, not just for food, but to be visible, to be present. The local community, which had initially been wary of the bikers, started to understand. These weren't criminals. These were protectors. Maria got a job as a bookkeeper at a local business, one owned by a Hells Angels member who vouched for her. The pay was fair. The hours worked around Emma's school schedule. For the first time in years, Maria had stability. Emma thrived. She drew pictures constantly. Bikers and little girls, motorcycles and sunshine, always with the words, "Thank you," somewhere in the art. She gave Bull a crayon drawing of him standing between her and monsters. He kept it in his wallet. One Saturday, Emma asked, Mr. Bull, why did you help us? You didn't even know us. Bull thought for a moment. Because when someone asks for help, you help if you can. That's what strong people do. They protect those who can't protect themselves. When I grow up, Emma said seriously, I want to be strong like you. You already are, sweetheart, Bull said. You saved your mama by being brave enough to ask for help. That's the strongest thing anyone can do. The federal prosecution brought charges against 15 members of the Loan Shark operation, including the 2 men who'd attacked Maria. With her testimony and evidence from other victims who came forward, inspired by her courage, the case was solid. The defense tried to intimidate Maria. Their lawyers filed motions to discredit her. They sent investigators to her old neighborhood asking questions. But every time Maria felt scared, every time she wanted to back out, she'd see Bull or one of his brothers outside the courthouse, or at the apartment, or checking on Emma at school. The night before she testified, Maria called Bull. I don't know if I can do this. Face them in court. They're so scary. They're men, Bull said simply. Just men. And you're a woman who loves her daughter enough to face them. That's more powerful than any threat they can make. Plus, 20 of us will be in that courtroom. You won't face them alone. The next day, Maria walked into federal court wearing a simple blue dress. The gallery was packed. In the back, 3 rows sat Hell's Angels, not in full colors, but in clean jeans and respectful shirts, there to support, to witness, to remind everyone that Maria Rodriguez was not alone. She testified for 6 hours. She didn't break. She didn't falter. She told her story clearly, powerfully, damning the men who'd exploited her desperation and threatened her child. When she stepped down from the witness stand, she looked at the Hell's Angels in the gallery. Bull nodded once. You did good. The verdicts came back guilty on all counts, multiple life sentences. The organization was dismantled. Maria Rodriguez and her daughter could breathe freely for the first time in over a year. Maria started therapy through a program the Hell's Angels helped fund. Emma joined a support group for children who'd witnessed violence. Both slowly learned to sleep without nightmares, to answer the door without fear, to believe the bad men were really gone. The Hell's Angels didn't hover. They checked in weekly, provided security when needed, but gave space for Maria and Emma to rebuild their independence. This wasn't about creating dependency. It was about providing a safety net until they could stand on their own. Maria became an advocate for women trapped in predatory lending situations. She worked with legal aid organizations, testified before state legislatures about the need for stronger consumer protection laws. Her experience, her courage, became a force for change. Emma excelled in school, especially in art. She created a portfolio of drawings about the day the bikers saved us, which her teacher submitted to a children's art competition. It won first place. The prize was a college scholarship fund. At the award ceremony, Emma gave a speech. She was 8 now, taller, confident, no longer the terrified little girl who'd run into a truck stop crying for help. A year ago, I was scared. I didn't know if anyone would help my mama. But Mr. Bull and his friends did. They taught me that heroes are real, and sometimes they ride motorcycles. The audience of parents, teachers, and local officials erupted in applause. Bull, sitting in the back row with his brothers, felt something he rarely allowed himself to feel. Pride that went beyond the club, beyond the brotherhood, to something deeper and more meaningful. Before you go, tell us in the comments. Would you have helped? Would you have answered Emma's cry? Your thoughts matter to us. 1 year later, full circle. On the anniversary of the truck stop rescue, Rosie held a celebration. Maria, Emma, the Hell's Angels, Sheriff Crawford, prosecutors, victims' advocates, and dozens of community members gathered not to celebrate violence, but to celebrate the power of answering a cry for help. Emma, now 8, stood at a microphone that had been lowered to her height. A year ago, I was the scariest day of my life. My mama was being hurt, and I didn't know what to do. But she told me to run and find help, so I did. I ran into Rosie's and I saw these big, scary men with motorcycles, and I thought maybe if they're scary to me, they'll be scary to the bad men, too. The crowd chuckled. Emma continued, her voice growing stronger. But they weren't scary. They were kind. Mr. Bull, he knelt down and talked to me like I mattered. And then he and his friends, they saved my mama. They kept saving us every day after. They made sure we were safe and had a home, and that the bad men went to jail. She looked directly at Bull. You taught me that family isn't just who you're born to. It's who shows up when you need them. Thank you for showing up. Bull walked to the microphone and knelt beside Emma, just like he had a year ago in that parking lot. You saved your mama, Emma. You were brave enough to ask for help. That's the hardest thing and the most important thing. Never forget that. He stood, addressing the crowd. Everyone asks why. We helped. Like it's some kind of mystery. But it's not complicated. A child asked for help. We had the ability to help. That's all it takes. Recognizing when you can make a difference and choosing to do it. Everyone in this room can be a hero. You just have to answer when someone asks. The celebration continued with food and music and community. The Hells Angels, once viewed with suspicion by many in the town, were now respected as the protectors they'd always been. Their annual charity ride, with proceeds going to victims of domestic violence and predatory lending, had become a major regional event, raising over $200,000 that year alone. 5 years later, Emma's choice. Emma graduated middle school with honors. She'd grown into a thoughtful, artistic teenager with a special interest in social justice. For her 8th grade final project, she created a documentary about predatory lending practices and how they target vulnerable communities. It featured interviews with her mother, with Bull, with prosecutors, with other victims who'd come forward inspired by Maria's courage. The documentary won statewide recognition and was used by law enforcement agencies as a training tool. Emma Rodriguez, the scared 7-year-old who'd run crying into a truck stop, had become a voice for change. Bull attended her graduation ceremony. Afterward, Emma approached him with a large framed photograph, the security camera image from Rosie's truck stop, showing her running toward the Hells Angels booth, frozen in the moment before everything changed. This is for you, Emma said, for the clubhouse, so everyone remembers that what you do matters, that answering one little girl changed so many lives. Bull accepted the frame, his eyes misty. You changed our lives, Emma. You reminded us why we wear these patches. Thank you for choosing us. I'll always choose you, Emma said. Your family. 10 years later. The legacy. Emma enrolled in law school, specializing in consumer protection and victims' rights. Her goal was to fight the kind of predatory practices that had nearly destroyed her family. The Hells Angels provided a scholarship, the Maria and Emma Rodriguez Educational Fund, established to help children of crime victims pursue higher education. Maria ran a nonprofit that provided emergency financial assistance to families facing medical debt, using a network of verified, ethical lenders and advocates. She'd turned her trauma into a lifeline for others. The Hells Angels Protection Program became a model for other clubs nationwide. They partnered with law enforcement, prosecutors, and social services to create safe corridors for crime victims needing protection. Bull traveled to other chapters, training them on how to balance their brotherhood with community service. On the 10th anniversary of the rescue, Rosie's truck stop installed a memorial plaque. On this day, a child's cry for help was answered by unexpected heroes. May we all have the courage to run toward those who need us, and the wisdom to answer when help is asked. The photo of Emma running into the diner, now iconic, was featured in a national campaign about bystander intervention and community courage. It reminded people that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear leather and answer when a little girl in a yellow sundress asks them to save her mama. Bull, now in his 60s and still road captain of his chapter, kept Emma's crayon drawing in his wallet, the edges worn soft from a decade of carrying it. Beside it was a photo from Emma's law school graduation, with her in her cap and gown, standing between Bull and Maria, all three smiling. Someone once asked Bull what that day in the parking lot had meant to him. He thought for a long moment before answering. It reminded me why we exist. Not for the bikes or the brotherhood. Those are important, but they're means to an end. We exist to be strong enough to protect those who can't protect themselves. Emma's cry for help? That was our calling. Answering it? That was our purpose. If this story reminded you that heroes exist in unexpected places, that courage means answering the call to help, please subscribe to Bike Diaries, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to remember that good people still exist in this world. The Hells Angels, who saved Maria and Emma Rodriguez that day, didn't do it for recognition. They didn't do it for praise. They did it because a child asked for help, and they were able to answer. In that moment of crisis, they became what they'd always been meant to be: protectors, defenders, heroes who proved that brotherhood extends beyond patches and rides to include anyone brave enough to ask for protection. Sometimes the bravest cry for help interrupts the quietest mourning. And sometimes, the answer to that cry changes not just one life, but an entire community, reminding us all that we're capable of being heroes if we just choose to answer when someone needs us. Thank you for watching. Be safe. Be brave. Be the person who answers the call. And if this story touched your heart, tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and share your own story of unexpected heroism. We all have the power to be someone's hero. We just have to choose to show up.